We went to pause in our service and say a huge good morning to all the virtual members of Columbine United Church. Those of you who are joining us from literally across the United States, some of you on the other side of the pond, it is great to have you with us. A huge special welcome to our men and women in uniform who dial into this service on YouTube. It's great to have you with us as well. But to all of you, what I always like to tell you is don't just sit here and watch the service. Like it. Put it on your Facebook page. Send the URL to somebody who you know is going through a time of trial, who really needs to hear this message. Be an active part of Columbine United Church. In fact, I even want to extend an invitation to those of you who are our virtual members to pledge and join us financially, support the overall ministry of Columbine United Church. It's great to have you with us. Let's all give them a huge Columbine welcome. Very good. Before I begin the service, I went to say, where's Diane Young? Diane, I just want you to know that you are in our thoughts and prayers. Diane's husband, Rick, passed away on Saturday morning. Was it Friday morning? It feels like, gosh, so much has happened. Very quick illness, 6 months from diagnosis to time of death to time of resurrection. So our thoughts and prayers go with you as well today. Very good, very good. So today is the second Sunday of Lent. Last week, we had the snowstorm. We had to cancel the service, and that's where we always enter into Lent with kind of a huge sense of understanding, a huge sense of awareness, because Lent is the 40 days minus Sundays before Easter, 40 days. And 40 days in the Bible is very significant. The whole notion that it's 40 days between Ash Wednesday and Easter is significant because 40 days means a time of testing, a time of trial. And there are many stories in the Bible that have to do with 40 days and 40 nights. In fact, can you name some of these stories that have to do with the 40 days and 40 nights? What? Rain. Noah. Thank you. Yeah, not more rain. Come on. Flush that out a little bit. Rain. Noah and the ark. What's another story? 40 days and 40 nights? 40 years of wandering. I said 40 days and 40 nights, not 40. Although sometimes life, that's not a bad insight. I'll go there. 40 is significant. What, another story? 40 days and 40 nights? What? Jesus in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights. There's Moses up on the top of Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights. The Israelite spies go into Israel, and they spy out Israel for 40 days and 40 nights. Justin next week is going to preach on, this is one of my favorite ones, when Goliath comes out and taunts the soldiers of Israel for 40 days and 40 nights, hurls insults and abuse at them until David finally goes out and confronts them. The 40 days and 40 nights are symbols of times of testing and trial. Times of testing and trial. Lent is to be a time of testing and trial and introspection. How can we be victorious in the times of testing and trial? And that's what we're going to be looking at throughout the next several weeks, all the way up until Easter, is how can we be victorious during times of testing and trial? And so today, I want to begin with the most popular, well-known story of 40 days and 40 nights, and that's the story of Noah. Listen to this great old story. It was the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, that it happened. All the underground springs erupted, and all the windows of heaven were thrown open. Rain poured for 40 days and 40 nights. That's the day Noah and his sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth, accompanied by his wife and his sons' wives, boarded the ship. And with them every kind of wild and domestic animal, right down to all the kinds of creatures that crawl and all kinds of birds and anything that flies. They came to Noah and to the ship in pairs. Everything and anything that had the breath of life in it, male and female of every creature, came just as God commanded Noah. Then God shut the door behind him. The flood continued for 40 days, and the waters rose and lifted the ship high over the earth. The waters kept rising, the flood deepened on the earth, the ship floated on the surface. The flood got worse until all the highest mountains were covered. The high water mark reached 20 feet above the crest of the mountains. Everything died. Anything that moved, dead. Birds, farm animals, wild animals, the entire teeming exuberance of life, dead. And all people, dead. Every living, breathing creature that lived on dry land died. He wiped out the whole works, people and animals, crawling creatures and flying birds, every last one of them gone. Only Noah and his company on the ship lived. The floodwaters took over 150 days. And here the reading ends, and may God bless these words now as we seek to apply them to our lives. So the sermon series is called The 40s, and today is resilience. My walkway, my challenge to all of you, especially high school and junior high kids, I want to be talking to you a little bit today, is the word resilience. I want you to remember the word resilience. Come Wednesday, when you're thinking about what did Steve preach about on Sunday, the word is resilience. The word is resilience. Let's dive in. Let's dive in. Devastation. Devastation. You know, that's the image that we need to have about Noah and the ark, is complete and total devastation. I mean, just think about these words. What a story. Anything that moved, dead. Birds, farm animals, wild animals, dead. All people, dead. Every living, breathing creature, dead. God wiped out the whole works. Every last one of them gone. How many of you have young children? Don't read them the story of Noah's Ark. This is a violent story, which always makes me chuckle, you know, when I go into Bible bookstores and I see this kind of picture. It rained and poured for 40 days. You know, that's not the image. The image is one of devastation. The image is one of complete and total destruction. You know, this is a powerful story for us to pay attention to. For 40 days and 40 nights, it hammered and flooded. You know, the reason why I believe that this story was remembered, because you know what? Life feels this way. Life can feel like an overwhelming rainstorm where it's just one thing right after another. And oh, if it only lasted 40 days and 40 nights, right? Anybody can survive 40 days and 40 nights. I mean, it's when people tell me, you know, bad things come in 3, my response is, oh, please, may it only be 3. Because it's never been my experience that bad things only come in 3. It's like 30. Bad things come in 30s. 40 days and 40 nights, that's easy. 4 years. 10 years. 40 years. Now we're talking a flood. We've all been there. See, I believe that that's why this story of Noah and the ark was remembered and written down. And this is a convoluted story. You know, I told the 8 o'clock service that we could do a whole sermon series on all the implication of Noah and the ark, because, you know, if you think about it, you know, who brought this devastation? God. You know, and when people read the story and they know that God did that devastation, people go, I've been there. I felt that way. When I felt as though that every turn of the corner of life that something bad was happening to me, I've been asking myself, you know, why did God do this to me? Why did God do this to me? You know, have I angered God in some way? There's been a lot of death in the church this past month or so. 2 weeks ago, I buried Amy. Where are you, Amy? Amy Chris, right in front of me. I buried your mom, Carol. And you want to talk about devastation? When Amy sat and talked with me about her mom's story, I was humbled. She was diagnosed with breast cancer in her early 50s, early 40s. Then at 55, her husband was killed in a car wreck. The very next day, her mother died. They had 2 funerals in 3 days. And then following that, every 4 years, the cancer resurfaced. And there were more surgeries and more chemo and more treatment. And then as part of her treatment, she was given a medication that destroyed her bones, made them so brittle that she would fall, and she broke legs, and she broke wrists, and had her shoulders redone. I mean, you would talk about a rainstorm of devastation. In fact, when we sat down to plan the memorial service, one of the things that Amy said, she goes, "Now I know that somehow this is a part of God's plan for my mom." I was like, let's stop right there. Just because devastation happens doesn't mean that God singles us out and says that I'm going to punish you. No, this is part of the story that gets confusing. God does not bring this devastation. It might feel as though God brings the devastation, but God is not the author of devastation. These things just happen because we live in a world where sometimes bad things happen. And the challenge is that when there is a flood, how can we rise above? How can we be victorious? Because, one of the most powerful things for me about doing Carol's memorial service is, while there was a lot of tears at that memorial service, you know what people talked about when they talked about Carol? They talked about how she was victorious and her love and her compassion. In fact, one of the things that Amy said is that, we're going to be, we have to bury my mom. We're going to bury my mom beside my dad out at Fort Logan, and we need to change the plaque on their above their ashes. And she said we only have 9 letters to use. We only have 9 letters that we use to describe my mom. And I said, I'm not the best speller in the world, but I think I have your word. RESILIENT. Resilient. There was something about Carol that was resilient. If you want to talk about somebody who is victorious when times are flooding, when times of trial, when there's a time of testing, or if you see people who are able to rise above and stand tall, well, you'll find people who are resilient. And we have to learn how to be resilient in the middle of our own lives. Before I wrote this sermon, I sat down with Mitch Samuel, and Mitch for me is somebody who was resilient. Because many of you might not know the story about Mitch, that he really doesn't want to be playing music at Columbine United Church. He'd rather be the music director at the Country Dinner Playhouse, where he was for years, until one day he went and he put his key in the lock of the Country Dinner Playhouse and it didn't work. And overnight he was unemployed. And suddenly there's mortgages and car payments, insurance and kids to feed, and on and on and on and on. And so we talked about what that was like for him. And how he discovered that sense of being resilient. And I could have interviewed any one of you. Could have interviewed Justin. We were sitting last night at Tim James's birthday party, and we were at the table, and we were talking about your journey. Case's baptism was so cool. But but in that celebration, it's like, wow, there was, if it was 40 days and 40 nights of trials and temptation. Resilience. Being victorious. How can you be victorious? You see, for me, when I look at the story of Noah and the ark, there's just a few things I want to grab a hold of about how you can be resilient. And really, high school kids and junior high kids, I want you to dial in, because I want you to think about this. Because you know what? Your lives are full of rainstorms. Your lives are full of floods. There's that whole flood of hormones that kind of comes barging into your life, or it's like, there's the flood of expectations that your parents have. Clean the room, clean the house, do your homework. There's the flood of the tests that happen. You go to school, and every time you turn around, there's another test, there's another test, there's another test. Grades and this and that. It's just overwhelming. And yet we expect you to be victorious. We want you to be victorious. We want you to rise tall in life. And so as I was writing the sermon today, I was thinking about you guys, because I want you to be victorious. See, the first thing for me that comes in, if you want to be victorious, you got to say, this is my boat. I got to get on this boat. Because every day that you spend running from this, you're not being resilient. See, resilient comes from the Latin word resilere, which means to spring forward, versus resile, which means to fall back. To be victorious, you got to spring forward. You spring forward when you say, this is my boat. This is my life. I don't like it, but it is my time of testing. It is my time of trial. Because when you run from it, when you flee and you say, God, I don't want this. I don't want to have to go through this. I don't want to take this test. I don't want to go through this. I don't want to have this teacher. I don't want to have this class. I don't want to have this addiction. I don't want to have this divorce. I don't want to be unemployed. I don't want to have this illness. Please, God, take it from me. Every day you spend doing that, you're postponing your life. You're resilient. You fall back. To be victorious in life, to be resilient, you have to somehow say, this is my life. I am going to have to confront what it is that's in front of me. This is my boat. And when you're able to say, this is my boat, I might not like it, but it is my boat, you know what? You begin the process of empowerment. You begin to stand tall and say, no matter what these circumstances are, this is my life, I'm going to live it. Then after they got on the boat, and God sealed the door up, I like to wonder, what was the very first thing they did? Noah and his family. You know what I think the very first thing they did? They wept. I think they wept. They held each other and they wept. You should weep. Weeping is important. In fact, one of my favorite books is When Life Falls Apart. And the author says, when life falls apart, the very first thing you need to do is give yourself permission to cry and cry and cry. You know what the second thing they did on Noah's Ark? They started digging. They started digging. I raise horses. Horses create something on the backside that if you don't deal with it, it piles up. And if you're going to have horses, you better learn how to dig. If you're going to be victorious in the middle of the middle of the rainstorm and the flood, you better learn how to dig. Because I got to tell you, inside that ark, it did not smell very good. And that stuff piled up on the bottom, and you could use some of it for ballast. But at some point in the middle of the tears, Noah had to put rakes and pitchforks in each of their hands and said, start digging. If you're going to be victorious in the middle of your life, in the middle of your flood, in the middle of your time and your testing and your trial, you're going to have to confront in your life and start digging. Because if you are inactive, if you don't confront it, it's just going to pile up. And at some point, you're going to say, I have to deal with this ugly, whatever it is that's piling up around me. I have to deal with it. You have to go find the attorney. You have to go find the doctor. You have to go find a new job. You have to start studying for the test. You can wish that you didn't have to take this test. You wish that you didn't have to take this class. But you know what? You do. And the only way you're going to be victorious is if you say, I have to take this class. I have to study. And you have to put my butt in the chair time with the books open. You might have to get a tutor. You might have to say, I do not understand. Somebody please help me. Because adults, do we not have to do that on a regular basis? I do not understand. Somebody please help me. And it's the people who are not able to do that who are not victorious. But the people who are saying, you know what? I have to go get this help. And it might be that you might have to go find the mortuary. You might have to go find a graveside. You might have to confront your death. Just because there is victorious doesn't mean you're not going to die. We're all going to die. But the reason why I believe Noah and the ark was remembered is because it's a way of saying God is not going to destroy us. God is not going to wipe us out. We're all going to die. But Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. Those that believe in me, though they die, yet shall they live. We believe in the resurrection. We believe in graduation. We believe in graduation, being victorious. And part of it is remembering that. Facing our death, knowing that it is not God's final answer, it is transition. Are you digging? And Nicholas came out and talked with me after the service at 8 o'clock. She said, after my divorce, she said there was so much that I had to deal with, that there were some days where I just didn't feel I could dig out. And I realized that's probably Noah and the ark is the first time where they came up with the term, I can't dig out. And I'll give you permission. There are some days where you just have to not dig out that day. But you need to know firsthand, every day you don't dig out, it doubles. And so if you postpone it for a week or a month, you're going to have a lot in your life. That at some point, you're going to have to dig. Are you digging? Or are you running? So here's this powerful thing for me about digging. Digging builds resilience. Digging builds a sense of empowerment. One of the most resilient people I know is Jeff and Linda Veris. Jeff Veris is someone who, every time I go see Jeff, as a minister, I'm always supposed to go and I'm kind of supposed to bring happy, feel good to people's lives. When I go visit Jeff Veris, Jeff, gives me happy, feel good. And this is a guy who's had a major stroke, who has an MS, who's in a wheelchair. Doesn't have any use of his left side of his body. And he's somebody who has realized, he used to be a hugely successful businessman. In fact, he lived life the way he drove. And if you, Brian, is it? And if you ever drove with Jeff Veris, you knew you had to hang on. In fact, one time I was going down Santa Fe, and there's this guy tailgating me, ran up behind me, and I almost felt like I wanted to flip him off. And he came out, this is Jeff Veris. And to have this guy have this yanked out from underneath him, and he's now in a wheelchair. And he talks about, you have to confront it. You have to confront it. You have to deal with your illness. You have to every day find a new reason to keep on living. And as caregiver, you want to talk with some courageous people. Talk with caregivers. Linda talks about, my house is now filled up with wheelchair marks. He's ripping apart the whole inside of the house. And every time I turn around, there's new things I got to do. And one time I talked with Jeff, I said, so Jeff, what gives you the ability to carry on? You know what he said to me? I love this. I want to leave my grandchildren a legacy of resilience. I want to leave my grandchildren, I love that, a legacy of resilience. And I keep on, whenever I walk away from Jeff's house, I go, I want to be like Jeff Ferris. Because I don't know if I could. I want to be like Linda. I don't know if I could. I hope I can. Resilience. Springing forward. To be resilient, I think the thing you have to pay attention to is the rainbow. You know, Noah and the ark, they didn't know that there was a rainbow at the end of the story. They just knew they were in the middle of the storm. We know there's a rainbow. That's why this story is remembered. And so in the middle of it, we have to remember the rainbow. You know, Carol Kemper was someone who knew about rainbows. Boy, at the memorial service, that we showed the slideshow when she's beaming and she's surrounded. I mean, she's got broken this and broken that, and she's had surgery. She's lost her hair I don't know how many times, and she's beaming. She remembered the rainbow. She knew there was a rainbow. She knew there was better times that are coming. And sometimes you have to create those better times. You know, for me, the rainbow is the vision that I hold in my life of 5 years down the road. Where do I want to be in 5 years? High school kids, junior high kids, where are you going to be in 5 years? How old are you going to be in 5 years? Think about it right now. Think, how old are you going to be in 5 years? How old are you going to be in 5 years? 22. You have graduated from college. How old are you going to be in? So you'll be almost graduated from high school. Where are you going to be in 5 years? You'll be 19? So think about, what do you want to be doing in 5 years? What do you want to be doing? Graduate from college? Getting ready for college? Graduate from high school? Then think about, are you doing right now what it is that will aim you to that vision in 5 years? Because that 5 years should be your rainbow that you're aiming for. The rest of you, think about where you're going to be in 5 years. When you look back at the middle of your life, 5 years back, are you going to say, wow, I've come a long way? So then does that mean that where you are right now, are you aiming yourself to your future? There's a woman in our church who, another inspiration, oh my gosh, going through this tremendous leukemia surgery or process, and talk about incredible odds. And we just found out that her bone marrow transplant took, and she's going home. She's home, you know, and she now gets to look forward to being at her little kid's graduation from high school someday. But in the middle of it, when her mouth was filled with the cancer sores, and there was no hair, and your bones are screaming at you. I remember talking with Heather, and I said, Heather, it's right now where you got to put together a vision of what your life is going to look like after this is all over. And so she sat and she talked about, I'm going to be home. I'm going to be with my kid. I'm going to be with my husband. I'm going to be with my friends. I'm going to be sleeping in my own bed. You know, sometimes it's so important to remember how beautiful our own bed is. And baby, she clung to that vision. She clung to that rainbow. What's your rainbow? What's your rainbow? You know, the powerful thing for me about resilience is that it's victorious. It's being victory. It's being, I'm going to rise above. I'm going to learn how to swim. I'm going to learn how to walk on water, baby. Because notice, you know, God doesn't say there's never going to be another flood. There's going to be floods. It's going to rain. The promise is, I'm not going to wipe you out. That means that there are going to be storms, and you know what? You're going to have to be resilient. We're going to have to be resilient. Resilier. Spring forward. You know, in the book of Isaiah, God's promise is, the waters will never, ever again overtake you. Why? Because I am going to be with you. Resilience. Rise above. Amen.
Let's pray. God, we hear those words. I am with you. Say it to us over and over and over again. Because, God, many of us are in 40 days and 40 nights. Many of us are being tested. Many of us are in circumstances where we are surrounded by all of the garbage of life. And we wonder if this is our boat. We wonder if we can dig out. We wonder if there are any more rainbows left. So come into our lives. Remind us again that you are with us. Remind us that you have given us shovels, pitchforks. Remind us that you've given us companions for this journey, and family and friends and strangers even. Remind us that the sky does turn blue, that the clouds go away, that the ice melts, that the floods subside, that rainbows do appear. May we be the kind of people, God, who go out into the world today and carry that message into our homes, into our neighborhoods, into our workplaces and schools, into the places that we volunteer, into the strangers that we bump into each and every day. May we be the kind of people who truly are resilient and tell the world that they too can be resilient. God, all along you've been teaching us a prayer. It's a prayer about your will being done, about earth in 40 days being turned into something new and something else that we call heaven, about sins being forgiven, about evil being overcome. It reminds us of resilience. We lift it up now saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses. We forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.